Many believe that in being crucified, Yeshua ended the sacrifice system. But this view is based on a lack of understanding of Yeshua's sacrifice and the sacrifice system in general. First off, sacrifices did atone sin. It says so many times over in Scripture. If there was a standing temple, whomever of Israel did not make the necessary sacrifices bore their iniquity. The only exception to this was during the Great Tribulation, when sacrifices were expressly forbidden. But before that, sacrifices continued even after Yeshua's death, although the Talmud records that the scarlet thread of the scapegoat stopped turning white in 30 AD, the year Yeshua was killed, meaning the sins of the unrighteous were no longer being atoned through the sacrifices. The reason for this is not because Yeshua ended the sacrifice system. Yeshua made it clear that not one jot nor tittle would pass from the law till all was fulfilled. Now, John 19 tells us on the cross, Yeshua said it is finished. And in Revelation 16, God says it is done after the 7 bowls of wrath are poured out on Jerusalem. But the final it is done comes after New Jerusalem descends from heaven, and God has made all things new. So the part that was finished in John 19 is the work Yeshua said was finished in John 17, which is the work the angel said Yeshua would do when he told Mary his name is Yeshua, meaning he will save. That work is the work of salvation, bringing an end to the old world, which is why those days are called the last days or end of days in Scripture. But there are 2 more parts to the finished work of creating the new. One completed in 70 AD at the end of that age, when God's kingdom was set up at the fall of man's kingdom, one which we await. So the kingdom was set up and the judgment came. So what passed from the law? As a result of Yeshua's death, the Passover lamb has now been killed. There cannot be another. So the Passover sacrifice has changed. And as a result of the final judgment on Jerusalem, the things in the sacrifice system that pertain to that judgment also had to change. I deal with these in my study of Ezekiel's temple, and additional details can be found in my studies of the red heifer and Yom Kippur. The reason the sins of the unrighteous were no longer being atoned through sacrifices after 30 AD is because they murdered God's only begotten Son, who he sent to save them from their sins. So the cup of God's wrath was getting full. But instead of repenting, they persecuted his followers also until all the blood from Abel to Zechariah came on that wicked generation, just as Yeshua prophesied. Yeshua caused the sacrifices to cease when he destroyed the temple in 70 AD. The word for cease is Shabbat. Like you Shabbat work on Shabbat, then you resume work afterwards, not Kala or Katam, which signifies a full end. This cessation is because all sacrifices have to be offered at the door of the temple. So without a temple, there can be no sacrifices. Now, I believe that when Yeshua comes to bring the kingdom to earth, he will build a physical temple in Jerusalem, which will once again be the center of the true worship of God, and that sacrifices will resume at that temple. The sacrifice system not only atones sin, but it foretold God's plan and what was coming. And even after the millennial reign, another rebellion rises. So there is more to tell, and I believe that story is told in the updated sacrifices of Ezekiel's temple. Now, Mark 15 says the veil of the temple was ripped from top to bottom the moment Yeshua died. And this may seem like any and everyone is now able to come into the Holy of Holies. But this argument falls apart under scrutiny. The temple is God's house. The Holy of Holies, his throne room. Or in our case, bedroom. But just as most people do not leave the front door to their house wide open as an invitation for any and everybody to come into their house, so God restricts who is able to come into his house. The only people allowed in God's house are the sons of Aaron and the sons of Levi. The only person ever allowed into his throne room is the high priest. So it says the veil was ripped, but says nothing of the front door being unlocked or its keys being distributed to the whole world. So the veil being ripped is like saying your bedroom door is open, but the front door is still locked, meaning only those who are already in the house or have the key to your front door have open access to your bedroom. Now, Yeshua gave the keys to the kingdom to Peter, whose teaching most of the world rejects in favor of the teaching of his chief adversary. So the vast majority do not even have access to God's kingdom, much less the front door to his house. Instead, They are trying to slip in through a back door or open window, the way thieves and robbers do. But Yeshua makes it very clear that he will gather out of the kingdom all that offend. And this already happened in 70 AD when those thieves and robbers were kicked out. So those who are trying to climb up this way now are just fooling themselves, because really they are climbing into the house of some other god when they could have just walked through the front door, because his front door is always open. The sacrifice system reveals God's entire plan of redemption, and it will not completely pass away until all is fulfilled.